Hey, good Monday morning, everybody. BM Weather Meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update. We're going to talk about the pattern as we go into the month of January, some key trends that we're seeing right now. I wanted to go ahead and wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season. Hope you all are able to spend some time with your family as we go throughout this week. Not going to be a whole lot of winter weather to talk about, going to warm up quite a bit as we go throughout this week. That will change, though, as we work into the new year. And I think it could change in a big way. I still think the pattern that we're seeing as we work into early to mid-January looks to be one that could offer up a lot of wintry weather chances and probably some decent shots of cold as well. And that's where we're going to start today. I want to really just hone in on that pattern. We know it's going to be warm over the next 7 to 10 days or so. That's been in the forecast for a while. I don't really have any changes to that idea. And it's all related to this big area of cold air, what we call a trough in Alaska. You can see this here. Historically speaking, when it gets cold in Alaska, it gets very warm in the United States. This is the upper level pattern. If we can see this reflected at the surface, look at how it just forces very mild Pacific air into the United States and into Canada. In fact, temperatures near the Hudson Bay 30 plus degrees above normal. In fact, maybe some areas 40 degrees above normal for a couple of these days in here. And in general, the warmth is going to linger around as we go throughout the rest of the year. But what you're going to start to notice happen as we really hit New Year's Eve and into the new year is this ridge of warmth and high pressure beginning to redevelop over Alaska. The opposite is true. When it gets warm in Alaska, it gets cold in the United States. Now, it will take some time. When you're that warm, it's not just going to flip overnight. But I do think that this is setting the stage for what will be some decent shots of colder air as we work into the back half of the first week of January and probably beyond that. And so as we continue to go through here, this ridge of high pressure and warmth over Alaska just continues to amplify with time. And you can see that it starts to allow for a trough and cooler air to develop in the eastern part of the United States. Now, again, guys, it's not going to just flip to 30 degrees colder than normal overnight. It's going to take some time, but I think what starts to happen is you start to moderate the warmth around the new year, and then you start to bleed in some cooler than normal air for the eastern and the southeastern part of the country. And then as we work, especially towards the end of the first week of January, that's when we really allow for a tap to the Arctic. In fact, you can see what starts to happen. This ridge of high pressure, let me go back here. This ridge of high pressure pumps so far north into the Arctic Ocean that your flow here into the United States is almost directly from the Arctic. And in fact, you start to put the tropospheric polar vortex back here over the Hudson Bay and over Greenland. And so I would imagine we've got a storm system around the 6th or the 7th of the month that right after that storm system, there could be some pretty notable cold air. I would not be shocked if that's a big winter storm somewhere as well. Where that is certainly remains to be seen. But I think that the theme that you should take away moving forward is, a slow moderation, cooler air bleeding in the first week of January, and then maybe a even bigger shot of cold air in here as we work towards the 6th or 7th of the month. Taking a look at the teleconnections, there are certainly multiple signals to support this idea. In the top left here, this is our EPO. That's our East Pacific Oscillation. It's basically just measuring the pressure in Alaska. Again, higher pressured warmth is going to favor a negative EPO and colder air in the U.S. We can see all the data on board for that idea. But to aid in this, we have our NAO, which is near Greenland. When we get higher pressure and warmth there, that's when this index goes negative and can help push colder air into the United States and into the mid-latitudes. And maybe even more notably, the Arctic Oscillation Forecast, which is basically going to indicate a disruption of the tropospheric polar vortex and forcing colder air south all throughout the mid-latitudes, diving sharply negative. And so what I went through and I looked at these three teleconnections, a negative EPO, a negative NAO, and a negative AO, and I just plotted years that had similarities to that in early January. Specifically, the first week of January, this is all of the dates since 2000 that had these three teleconnections, and you can see that this favors widespread I would say, much colder than normal temperatures. Now, if we take a look at the 10 to 15 day forecast, you can see the GEFS trying to start to hint at this. It's not quite there yet, but it is bleeding that colder air in a little bit more of a widespread nature. The EPS as well, it's not quite building the colder air in north yet, but it does have it south and east. The GEPS looks actually probably the most like this. Maybe it's a little bit too fast, a little bit too aggressive, but I think it's a representation of what things could start to look like here as we work towards the last part of the end of the first week of January to the start of the second week of January. And so I wouldn't be surprised if these two models here need to trend a little bit colder. And if as we work towards, let's say, the 6th to the 10th of the month or so, if we do look something like what this Canadian ensemble has, more like these Teleconnections. Now, I was also curious, okay, well, we get the cold shot, sure, that's great. What happens after that? Does the cold linger around? Well, if you lag those Teleconnections 5 days after, it actually gets even colder. And so again, this just goes to support the idea that once this cold air comes in, that it's probably going to hang around in a rather notable fashion. Now, there's more to the forecast than just these Teleconnections. I also want to look at the MJO. We're working into MJO phase 7 and 8. That means thunderstorm activity moving into the Western Pacific and towards South America and eventually Africa. And from a historical standpoint, as we go into phase 8 and probably eventually phase 1, really no matter how you shape this up, I looked at a bunch of different ways you could look at this, factoring in the ENSO state, factoring in what's going on with the global winds. Regardless, phase 8 and 1, these are colder phases for January. And it supports the idea that as we get into the start to the middle part of January, the pattern's just going to be colder than normal. Now, I do think that there's still a little bit up in the air in terms of the intensity of the cold. How notable can the cold air be? How long can it stick around? Because right now, a lot of this is tropospherically driven. Our pattern drivers in the troposphere are really driving the colder trend late the first week of January. But to keep this sustained for the majority of January, we're going to need the polar vortex in the stratosphere to come back over to us towards North America. And the EPS Weekly, this is its weeks 3 period, so the 7th to the 14th or so, it is trying to hint at this. This would open the door for a more sustained cold pattern. Now, if the vortex stays over here, then you're going to get more ups and downs. It probably will average still out colder than normal given the pattern drivers we talked about, but it wouldn't be, 10 plus degrees below normal. This is the key, I think, to keeping a notable sustained cold pattern around. And again, the weekly data right now certainly indicating that that will be possible. That is a big thing to keep an eye on. But with all that being said, this was our weeks 3 and 4 outlook from Friday. Everything that I'm seeing right now, I wouldn't have any change to this look. I think that maybe there's a risk that these much below normal temperatures could come maybe a little bit further south and east, and you could develop it up here in the northern plains at times too. But regardless, the takeaway here is a colder than normal pattern for much of the central and eastern US, and I just don't have a big change to that idea. And given the blocking and the higher pressure near Greenland and in the Arctic, I still think that it can be a snowier pattern as well. I think that the storm track from the Ohio Valley to the Great Lakes to the northeastern US and the mid-Atlantic, the 5th to the 20th is a favorable one for winter storms. Now, I'm not guaranteeing anything, guys. The storms still have to develop. Could it be that Chicago gets 5 storms and Indy gets skipped out? That's possible. Could Indy get a bunch of storms and Cleveland and New York City get skipped out? It's possible. But the pattern is more favorable than normal for snow chances and winter storms as we go throughout this 5th to the 20th time frame. And I would say that the data, this is the GEFS, the American data on the left, the Canadian data on the right, as we go towards the end of week 2, towards the back half of the first week of January, they're active. Again, I'm not putting snow totals on here, guys, but these blues that you see, this is a pretty aggressive signal from an ensemble model this far out. And they're aggressive for the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, into the northeastern part of the country. And I don't disagree with that idea as things stand right now. Guys, that's all I have for now. Be sure to keep an eye on the forecast ahead. Have a fantastic Christmas, guys. I hope everybody stays safe and has some wonderful time with their family. Wishing you all a very happy holiday season. Have a great day. We'll chat soon.